Good afternoon. My name is Gloria Massey-Chinea. Welcome to my world, Ventura County. I work as a volunteer for Election Integrity Project California. It's truly a pleasure working with the organization. Today, I have the president and the vice president of this nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. It is my pleasure to introduce you, President and co-founder Linda Paine, and Vice President and co-founder Ruth Weiss. I'd like to invite you to listen to the interview, and for that, I'm giving the opportunity to George Miller. He's the publisher of CitizensJournal.us. Join us in this interview, and welcome to my world, Ventura County.
Thank you, Gloria, for that wonderful introduction. As she said, I'm George Miller, publisher and co-founder of CitizensJournal.us, Ventura County's real news. And we're very fortunate to have with us today Linda and Ruth, who were very nicely introduced already. I have a little history with both of them. I can remember in a room, in a meeting of many different activist organizations back in 2010, where Linda expressed her outrage about the electoral system, how poorly it was run, and that she wanted to do something about it. And most of us didn't take it very seriously back then. But here we are 9 years later, 10,000 volunteers later, several lawsuits, and millions of voter records being deleted that are not legitimate voting records. She is the founder of Election Integrity Project, and Ruth Weiss has been with her basically since the beginning. And some people say that she is the brainiac. Probably knows more about election law than most lawyers from what I've seen, although she's not a practicing attorney. EIP-CA, as they call it, Election Integrity Project California, was created to document and study the California electoral process for flaws and anomalies, and they have found thousands of flaws and anomalies. I personally helped them find some of those flaws in 2010 and 2012. But the problem is they brought these flaws to the authorities, not much got done about it. So from the beginning we talked about getting some legal clout. And Linda has been very successful in negotiating an agreement with Judicial Watch, and now we understand has her own counsel retained as well. And they have already shown some remarkable successes that Linda will talk about today to us. So after 9 long years building up EIP-CA with over 10,000 volunteers in all 58 counties of California, 200 of them right here in Ventura County, recruited by Gloria's people, correct? We now have a major force. And we've never had such a force before. This is the first time ever that California has had a major overseer of the electoral process. And by the way, California didn't even have a statewide voter registration system until when?
2015, 16?
2015, didn't even have a system. So that's what we're up against. So Linda's team pulled off a big game changer, not only establishing the legal department, but also recently a publicity department to get the word out about what's happening, to attract people as volunteers, as donors, and to put pressure on the government. I'd like Linda and Ruth to spend about a minute each just briefly summarizing their backgrounds, and I'm going to ask you to describe the journey of how EIP-CA came to be and how it got to where it is today. Start with Linda.
Okay, well, as George said, we did begin in 2010 after observing the polls and wondering what in the world is going on. And 4 of us from the SoCal Liberty Coalition contacted an election law attorney and explained what we saw and described it and asked what can be done. And the astounding thing to us is that she said they recognized that there was election fraud happening in the state, but that the parties and the candidates could not do anything about it because it would be politicized. So if there was to be action taken to figure out what's going on, it would have to be a citizen-based organization. It would have to be based in integrity, and it would have to be nonpartisan.
Mm-hmm.
So the 4 of us basically said the age-old, if we don't do it, who will? And if we don't do it now, when?
Mm-hmm. Briefly, your background. I understand you're a former schoolmarm.
Well, I taught college prep courses for junior and senior high students with election integrity with advanced preparatory schools. It's an independent study program, and during the fall of the economy in California, we began to see a lot of the students not be able to afford the extra classes. So that opened up time for me to start to pay attention to what's going on in politics and in government, and it was pretty shocking what we were seeing.
What's your story, Ruth?
Well, I was a high school teacher
for 34
Two
years. I taught English and Spanish at Valhalla High School, which is the premier high school in the Grossmont Union High School District, which is in East County in San Diego. And I enjoyed my career immensely. My father was a U.S. history teacher, and from him I got my love of country, my love of history, my love of the founders, and the way that this country ought to be run. So when I began to feel what Linda and her other people felt when I didn't know them, but didn't know what to do. And then Linda and her team, really early on after they had incorporated, came to town, and I got wind of it. So I attended their presentation and volunteered from that point on.
So how did you get up to where you are today? Tell us about the journey that got us here to 2019, sitting here at this interview today.
Well, we came up with the idea of observing. We didn't call it observing at the time, but we had all watched the video from True the Vote and what they had done in Dallas, Texas, of watching the election process and being able to provide the information to somebody. So it began really with flying to Dallas, Texas. We contacted Catherine Engelbrecht from True the Vote, told her we were concerned about what was going on, and she invited us to attend their training of their Texas observers. Upon arriving, I found here was someone from Central Valley, and here was someone else from the Bay Area, all unbeknownst to each other. And we decided at that time that we needed to be something done in California. We started in the southern counties, the 9 southern counties, when we started Election Integrity Project California. And it really began with driving throughout the state in 2011, sort of building the ship and sailing at the same time. We met with citizen groups and asked, describe what we saw in 2010, and just asked one question. If we can observe the polls and document what's happening, would you join us? Well, 2,400 citizens from Shasta County down to San Diego County.
What year was that?
The Bay Area, 2011.
2011.
And the beginning of 2012. So Shasta County to San Diego County, the Bay Area, counties along the Nevada border, throughout the Central Valley, and then the 9 counties in the south. We had 2,400 citizens who said, well, we don't know what you're doing yet, but we're on. So we formed our first board in 2012, an amazing team of people that was a retired attorney, retired paralegal, not just a retired paralegal, but a paralegal who trained paralegals. Someone who is partially retired as a data analysis and a writer, and then several. That's Ellen Swenson. So she was, in fact, one of the founders of Election Integrity Project, and so that's how we began with the first board meeting and our paralegal bringing a box of 3-inch thick election code books for California, dropping one in front of each one and saying, if we're going to do this, we need to know what's in this book. We all laughed. She didn't, and she said, if we're going to do it right, you got to know the law.
How did you factor into all of this, Ruth?
Well, I came in shortly after that, and volunteering at first just to be a presenter for the organization. I figured that was a nice segue from teaching. And I soon became the coordinator in San Diego County and went from there. And then the next year I got on the board and been there ever since.
I'll be darned. I forgot to mention it earlier, but if you'd like to learn more about Election Integrity Project, go to EIP-CA.com or Election Integrity California, Election Integrity Project California on Facebook. When you started doing all those observations, what did you learn and what did you do about it and what happened?
Which is very unusual. Well, a lot of times you'll have volunteers step up and most will change their mind. But 2,100 citizens went out to 36 counties, which represented about 85% of the California population. And we observed the polls for the first time in California history, a citizen organization. And what we documented.
So before that, individuals could do it, but there was no organized effort?
Correct.
Ever, really?
That's correct.
This is basically history making.
Yes, yep. What we identified in that observation is that the basic narrative that all the problems in California are San Francisco and LA County were blown, because what we identified is the issues in every county were the same. They had variations of it, but it proved that the problem is systemic. And it proved that the issue was much deeper than we even imagined.
Is this a multi-party effort?
We are nonpartisan.
Totally nonpartisan, right? So you have people from all over the map working with you.
Right, anybody who'd like to.
This is kind of an open-ended question. What's wrong with California's electoral process?
Why don't you talk about the legislation? I think it starts there.
I think it starts with, and I love this analogy, so forgive me for doing it, but when there are people out there who want to do the wrong thing with an election, whether it's fraud or just manipulation or whatever, we call them sharks. And we have to swim in the water with those sharks, but we have to stay safe. And there is a way to swim in the water with sharks and come out with all your limbs, and that is if you're in a shark cage. And that's what our laws are. We have vertical bars that are our laws, and if those laws are good and solid and protective, then we've got a good cage, but then we've got the side bars as well. The horizontal bars are the enforcement of those laws. Well, we had very strong laws, with the exception of we don't have voter ID, which we really believe is very important for integrity. But otherwise our laws were really quite good, and we were proud to teach them. And so the problem was the enforcement, and that's what we first discovered in 2012, is that they simply were ignoring the laws or not teaching them to the poll workers, so the poll workers had no idea. They were on their own with so many things and had to just make some judgment calls, having no idea that some of the things they were doing were actually hurting the integrity of the election.
Is that a problem with the training or with the training materials that they use?
Both, it is. They don't have enough time, and we found some counties where only one of the people on that whole election board had to do any training at all. Everybody else just would show up cold and didn't know anything. All the way to counties like mine where they did train everyone, but they don't put a lot of time into training the law. They only train procedure. This is a brown box, this is a red box, this is a blue box. And so we have problems with that. As we have gotten closer now to 2018 and now into 2020, we still have non-adherence to the law. But in addition, we've had some very strong laws that have been weakened significantly by legislative action. Examples, we used to have to identify ourselves, since we had no voter ID, we had to strongly state our name and address out loud. It had to be repeated back to us. Then we had to write our own address down before we were given a ballot. And those laws were simply dismissed. And now all you do is walk in and you can hand them a slip of paper that you tore off of something with a name and address on it and exchange no words whatsoever and be handed a ballot.
So that means almost anyone can vote with a valid ID if the vote hadn't already taken place?
Anyone can vote in someone else's name by just putting that name on the table. The idea behind making you state it out loud is it takes a lot of chutzpah to walk in and claim you're somebody and have to memorize that person's address. It's a lot easier now, you just throw the paper down. So, and we did see some of that all the way back in 2012. We saw people throwing papers down and getting ballots of those names because they weren't enforcing that check-in law.
So
that's just one of the many laws. And from my perspective, the biggest concern that I had for 2016 and 2018 was that voter privacy is completely out the window now. Voters by law, the law is still in place, are supposed to vote by themselves in the privacy of a booth or compartment. And we saw people statewide voting at open tables, eye to eye, knee to knee, elbow to elbow, and that's a recipe for voter intimidation, and nobody seemed to care. So there's just a couple.
Negotiated agreement to force California to comply with federal election law, which demands that they keep accurate voter rolls. This involves the deletion of up to 1.5 million deceased duplicates of non-responsive
in 2017,
voter
we put out a
registrations.
press release stating that our data team had identified 3 to 4 million inactive voter registrants on the voter roll statewide, and 1.5 million of them belonged in LA County. And the problem with that is LA County is larger than 41 states in the union. So when LA County has 1.5 million extra registrants on the voter rolls, that allows for manipulation of those names that are on the voter rolls. We put that press release out, and within a week we got a call from Judicial Watch attorneys, their election law attorneys, and they knew there were problems in California, but they had no evidence. So they were stunned that we would put out such a report. We had a call with them and with our data team explained how we do our work, the security, the integrity, and enough detail that they realized that we would stand up in court. And so they asked if we would be the main plaintiffs in a lawsuit against Alex Padilla, Secretary of State, and LA County's Dean Logan. And we were thrilled to do it because we'd worked a long time, reported for years, and to really not see any of
How
this.
does someone donate or volunteer?
They can go to the website.
EIP-CA.com, right?
Right, and they can volunteer there, they can donate there, and they'll tell them how they can donate.
Okay.
But this time we're working, we're gonna have to pay attorneys, and that's why
Mhm.
we're looking to raise funds, because in order to ask for the open records that we're asking for, we need some legal muscle behind us.
Mhm.
We have tried to get open records, materials to open records before, and have pretty much been ignored, but now we're seeing some action.
So you need to get information. You're also auditing the electoral process in multiple jurisdictions, and you're looking at laws that you think aren't just or may need to be changed. Are you taking some lobbying action in that area to try to change existing laws or overturn court rulings?
We don't lobby. That's not part of 501c3 stuff. However, we do have a legislative oversight team. What we do is follow the laws that are being proposed. We keep looking at them as they go through the committee process and then the voting process, and we look to see how they get amended and that sort of thing. We do file position papers on ones that we really feel are either really great and we should accept, or those that we feel would be very damaging. In addition to filing those position papers, we often will let the people who are on our email list know that certain things are up for a vote, and if they'd like to weigh in with their own senators or assembly persons, that they can do that. And then we do have a very dedicated team in the Sacramento area who will then take our letters to the committee meetings and who will testify on our behalf. So we are doing that kind of communication, and we are finding that throughout this year, as we continue to show up, that they are not dismissing us quite as easily as they used to. So they're now at least listening to what we have to say, giving us more time to talk, and asking us questions. So far, they're still voting the way they want to, but at least we feel like we're making inroads.
You know, I would like to say about the overview is that Californians need to, they probably don't realize that we in California are the only state in the union that we know of that has the right to observe every aspect of the election process, ask questions and receive answers. And because of that, California is the only state that has this body of information. Other states can research the data, but they're not allowed to observe without getting permission from a political party or candidate.
So anyone can go down to the polls and do that, but with your training and infrastructure, they can get a lot more done, right?
Right, and that's what we're calling for. We hope to train 10 to 20,000 this year for the 2020 election. And it's so important that Californians join us in that effort, because what we do in California to restore integrity is now flowing upstream to the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, to Congress, and to other states who are now calling us and saying, how can we get started doing what you're doing?
Well, there you have it, California and America, Election Integrity Project. Linda Paine, Ruth Weiss, major movers of that organization. Stay tuned and watch our part 2 coming up on the issues. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.